Hello, everybody, and welcome into the very first episode of the Rugby Bunker podcast. I can't lie, after many weeks of planning and getting this all together, it feels very, very good to say those words out loud. I'm Ben Coles, I write for The Observer. He's Charlie Morgan, The Telegraph. And with this podcast, there's going to be a few objectives. We're going to try and break down the game tactically to tell you what we like and what we don't like. And we're going to try and give you some inside information from sources as well about the biggest stories in the game. But it won't just be Charlie. There's going to be a regular cast of rotating guests from both hemispheres who are going to be popping in to talk about the game around the world. Morgsy, we're here. How are you?
We're here. I'm very well. I'm extremely honoured to be the first guest on this. It's going to be a lot of fun. This season, off the back of a Lions tour, already feels like a busy one, and we haven't kicked a ball in anger. Well, in competitive rugby, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere yet. There's a Women's World Cup going on, which we're stuck into, and into the knockout stages. It's all go.
It certainly is. I mean, there used to be summers where we could kind of switch off for a little bit, and maybe we wouldn't watch a game or two for a couple of weeks, and we'd try and just relax. But I feel like those days are gone in normal years. With the Women's Rugby World Cup going on, they are particularly non-existent, and it's been fantastic. There's been so much to talk about, and we'll dive into that over the next kind of few minutes or so. To give a bit of background about you and me, Charlie, and how long we've sort of worked alongside each other, I sort of take it back to, I think it's around 2010, is that right?
It's about that, yeah. The 2011 World Cup felt like the first biggest tournament. I wasn't there, I was covering it from back here, but yeah, that's a decade and a half, Colsey. That's a long time.
It's a very long time. So we worked together for about 8 years at the Telegraph. Lots of time producing analysis alongside each other and lots of different features. And then with this podcast, what I want to try and achieve, I guess, is to give listeners kind of a bit of insight into how I work as a journalist, how we work as journalists, how we sort of break down the game, what we're looking for tactically, players that we're impressed by in terms of not just how they are on the field, but also how they're doing things off the field with promotions, and how they're sort of building a brand in the modern game as well, things like that. So there's going to be lots for us to get into. Really excited to be doing it with Charlie and lots of other guests as we carry it on. But to start with, Charlie, big Premiership rugby launch yesterday. We're going to dive into that and just have a little chat about each club and little details that we've picked up over the course of pre-season from chatting to people. Right, Charlie. So yesterday was at Twickenham for the Premiership rugby launch. We had, sorry, I've said the wrong name there. It's the Prem rugby launch. We were trying to work this out yesterday. Is it Prem Rugby? Is it Gallagher Prem? Is it just Prem? And also, because it's all in caps, do you have to shout it? I think I'm still. Have you got a preference? I'm still figuring it out.
My preference for when anybody else is saying it is to shout it. To wake me up, maybe, but also, yeah, just to see what that looks like more than anything. Second mention's allowed to be Premiership. I don't know. We joke about rebrands, don't we? And I'm sure we're going to do a fair bit of that over the course of in the Rugby Bunker. But they've done a really good job with the rebranding as far as how they want to.
I mean, look at it here. Beautiful.
I was thinking more how they're going to really highlight physicality and the primal aspects, the rivalries of the Premiership. That they seem to be really building impetus with that, and this is kind of a line in the sand after which they're not going to look back with that. And I think when we're getting. Why don't we start with Newcastle? Because the whole season and the whole pre-season has been framed by investment from Red Bull, which feels like a really big endorsement of where the league is going. And it sounds like I was man marking the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old yesterday. You were at the launch. What was Steve Diamond's demeanour like? He seemed to get more recruitment coming.
Just understandably so happy. And I know that sounds really obvious, but I can remember chatting to him when it was all going down back in, was it March time, like during the end of the Six Nations, wasn't it, that it kind of first broke about where Newcastle were financially and the difficulties they were facing. And yeah, obviously yesterday, absolutely buzzing, wearing the new Red Bull stash, incredible tan. I mean, one of the most tanned people I've ever seen, like a deep mahogany tan, which stood out more when he was
too stressed. Yeah, that's a constant. He's
I was trying to work that out when I saw him. I was trying to think, are you more tan than normal, or have I just forgotten how tanned you are because I haven't been up to Newcastle in a while, to my shame, sort of thing. But basically, the deep tan really emphasised his big smile when he was flashing his teeth, because he was such a happy man. And we've seen
Yeah.
Steve Diamond. Don't forget, we've seen him not only go through the uncertainty about Newcastle a few months ago, we saw him go through all the Worcester stuff about 3 years ago, didn't we? When they were sadly kind of folding, and he had to sort of steer the ship through that period. So look, he was buzzing. Newcastle very excited. He was more than happy to say that their recruitment is not done. They were sort of trying to get. I think he said they were trying to get a couple more deals over the line last night. So that's Wednesday night, because we're recording on Thursday. So potentially there's going to be more news about signings for them from the Southern Hemisphere. I think he said one outside back, one fly half, I want to say. So look, I think the key thing that he stressed yesterday, and I'm sure you'll agree with this because it's very sensible, is that there's so much upheaval going on there at the moment in terms of backroom staff as well. So kind of the medical teams and all the rebranding and trying to get all these new players coming in. So I mean, I'll ask you a bit about Tom Christie in a sec, but they're just juggling a lot of parts and a lot of bits. And I think he said, Steve Diamond, just let us get to November and that second block of games, and then you'll kind of get a better idea of what we're about. Because right now there's so many pieces going on and so much going on that we're just trying to get things kind of settled, if that makes sense.
For sure. The really, not to urinate on the bonfire a little bit, but this investment does also mean turbulence, and you're touching there on the backroom staff and the sort of the jobs that are made. There might be a bit of movement there that is going to be tricky to manage on the pitch. I have to say it is still going to be difficult for them this season. They have recruited smartly, as you'd expect with Steve Diamond, but my information is that their total budget for their squad won't be much higher, if any higher, than it was last year. And we saw what that meant for their results. I think where they will, the source was suggesting to me that they're going to be extremely well. I think the word that fairly aggressive was the term that was used as far as how they go about assembling a squad for next season for 26-27. And there was a great piece from our colleague Hugh Godwin, who went up there, and Steve Diamond gave him the phenomenal line that he's spoken to 13 agents of England players that are out of contract. We know that Finn Smith's one of them. Steve Diamond has worked with him at Worcester and been really kind of full of praise for him, even as a young lad. Steve Diamond's, I'm not. That would be a completely amazing story. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm fairly sure that Northampton will tie down Finn Smith, but I think that's the scale of Steve Diamond's ambition and how he wants to overhaul, and Red Bull's ambition. What they're going to be putting in. Simon Massey Taylor, the Prem Rugby chief exec, is on record as saying that Newcastle could go from from the lowest budgets in the league by some way to basically doubling that and being up there with Bath and as one of the biggest spenders. What that does for the ecosystem of the league is just going to be fascinating to follow, because it's competitive enough. It's competitive enough with how do you pick your top four now with what we've got at the moment as far as expenditure, which is the top four. With four clubs pressing up against the salary caps ceiling, five more in and around a similar sort of mark, and then Newcastle at the bottom, with Newcastle into that second bracket and then even into the top bracket. It's just so interesting. It really, really is. And for that to continue before the start of next season, great.
Hey, listen, mate, save your top four predictions for the episode in 2 weeks' time. Okay, because I'm sure we'll be doing. I think we'll both pick a full table from 1 to 10 when we get to that point. But you're right. I love the idea of fairly aggressive recruitment, like just what really going for it. And then be like, is this too much? Is this too much? Have I gone too far? And just kind of then trying to tone down the approach. Look, they're fascinating. I think they want to do it the right way. I think they want to get everything in place off the field in terms of marketing, in terms of stadium, training facilities, budget, academy. That's a huge thing, isn't it? And then they want to put all the nice pieces on top, which is the right way to do it. So fascinating first season for them. Should we jump to, just looking at the list of clubs, should we have a chat about Bristol? Bristol I find really
Yeah,
interesting. Tom Jordan was there yesterday at the launch, as well as Pat Lam. Tom Jordan seems like a lovely lad. Really kind of excited to have made the move. Said that he hadn't got too lost around Bristol yet, but I don't believe that, because we've been to Bristol. We've got lost around Bristol. It's very easily done.
we've been to Bristol for your stag do, mate.
We did go to Bristol for my stag do. Maybe
Of course
that's
we
why
were.
we were so lost. Could
You
could
were
be.
you were there in body and in fading spirit, I would say. I don't
Yeah,
think that's too
yeah,
unfair.
yeah. No,
But
no.
no,
It
Tom
gave me
Jordan,
flashbacks.
more Tom Jordan. Moving back to Tom Jordan, he what a signing that is! How much that suits the skinnier squad that Bristol are running with because of his versatility. He's an excellent 12. He's won the URC as a 10. He's started the test match as a 15. He really suits what they're about. What I learned about Bristol last year was that they have a dedicated recruitment analyst who works with that department and has developed an algorithm to see how much players on the market suit the very distinctive way that Bristol play, with lots of ball movement and lots of phase shape and very, very little box kicking, unlike a lot of sides these days around the world. So whenever they make a signing, I think it's really intriguing. And sure enough, when I think I was looking back, Jordan's arrival was actually announced in mid-November, and that has just looked a better and better signing over the course of the season after the Six Nations. Just looked really smart. And yeah, I can't. I think it will depend on how much they can get their best 25, 26 players, how often they play, whether how they juggle the resources, how much they're affected by injuries. But there's a lot to like. There's a lot to like there.
Yeah, one thing I would say about Tom Jordan is I think the idea was that you'd have AJ McGinty, Tom Jordan, Bernard Janssen van Rensburg as like your 10, 12, 13. I actually think we'll
Yeah.
see a bit more of Tom Jordan at 10 than we previously thought. Just chatting to him yesterday about that's very much his preferred position, which I didn't actually know.
Mm.
I think we'll see, and you're right about them running a skinnier squad. I think he will pop up a lot at 10. Pat Lam was big on defence. Just their defence is so much work has gone into that. Him and Jordan Crane, the defence coach, working together. Not a fresh system as such, but
Mm.
just really fine tuning everything. I think he says something along the lines of he's put more into defence this pre-season than he ever really has done before, because they do need a bit of balance. Balance is a word that George Skivington brought up about Gloucester as well. You do, the attacking is great, but you're going to need periods where you can tough it out. And a final point on Bristol. Sorry, did you want to say something on that, Charlie?
No, well, let's save it for that. I thought it was a beautiful segue into Gloucester, but we can
Oh
go
well,
back to that.
listen,
On
it
Bristol.
should be, and it can be, but one thing I just wanted to finally add on Bristol is that they're kind of like pre-season darling, if you were, and I've written about this on my Substack, the Off-Field Review. Seems to be Luka Ivanishvili, this kind of Georgian back row who's come in from Black Lion, the Georgian side, who just sounds like he is smashing people, like just absolutely battering people in training. Could be huge for them at the breakdown in terms of both clear outs for quick ball, which they want, and also defensively just winning turnovers. So I really would encourage people to, if he pops up in a match day 23 at the start of the season, or he's in the starting back row, don't be surprised because he sounds great. Gloucester. So Gloucester really interests me in terms of ingoings and outgoings, because they've actually had a higher turnover than a lot of clubs, and they seem to have kind of tried to bring in players in key positions. I'm thinking about Chapman at number 8, but the headline name, Charlie's Ross Byrne, isn't he? Everything in terms of Gloucester's season seems to ride on how Ross Byrne goes and how he settles, and they'll be looking at how Thomas Williams settled last season. One Premiership Player of the Season, went on a Lions tour, pretty good. and they'll be praying that if they can get something similar out of Ross Byrne in terms of his experience, but also his ability to run that team, that then they'll be able to kick on and get back into the playoffs. Because it's been like 6 years or something since Gloucester have been in the top four.
Yeah, and I really like George Kivington's manner. He's a very firm presence, I think, when he has to be, but he's also seemingly extremely good at delegating. James Lightfoot-Brown, their attack coach, there's been footage from pre-season of saying that they're not going to be all out attack, but giving the reins over in a really key meeting to Lightfoot-Brown, who's saying, look, we've got to keep going with this. We laid a really good foundation last year, but he said, I think his words were, we attacked well, but we're not a good attack yet, because good attacks happen over time. And I look at that Gloucester squad and think that it's a squad that's more, they've trimmed a bit. So Ackerman, Tuisui, Mercer in the back row, alone, all gone. But I look at it and think that it's a squad, a roster that really maybe suits a little bit better how they're going to go about things, and suits their tactical sort of outlook. And that is so key. That's what every kind of club, that's what successful clubs do really well. I just wonder whether you can't recruit cohesion, can you, together, if that's not the most corny thing that anybody's ever said. So I think maybe we're looking at next year, maybe the year after. Ross Byrne's there for a 3-year contract, I think. So maybe sort of next year and the year after I know that's just cliche, isn't it? Next year is Gloucester's year. But I think they'll surprise a few this year. I think they'll be in the mix. They'll take points off big teams. And it's whether they just sneak that fourth, I think they would be looking at the minute. But yeah, really interesting. So much to like about them. I feel I've been told that they're eyeing up for next season after, because the recruitment cycle's already starting, a really big sort of back rower to complement who they've got coming through. But yeah, a really intriguing side.
Do you reckon next year is Gloucester's year? Is written on the shed somewhere, just like on one of the seats or something? I hope so, and if not, it should be. I just want to add a final note on Gloucester, was that apparently Nepo Laulala, who's joined from Toulouse, I want to say, 50 cap All Black, and apparently he's basically been like a second scrum coach, working alongside Trevor Woodman in terms of his kind of influence and impact. That's really interesting. So Gloucester have a good idea who their starting 10 is. It's going to be Ross Byrne. Leicester, it's kind of mad, isn't it? Because they've gone from having Andre Pollard there to this wide open competition with, run me through the contenders, Charlie. Who are the contenders to start at 10 for Leicester?
James O'Connor's come in there. Orlando Bailey has come in there as well. They've got Billy Searle too, and then they've got a few academy guys. Tom Threffel, who they're being one of them. Oscar Talbot, for even further down the pecking order, that they're excited about. But you're not going to be thrown in for a run of games when you're that young. I think Orlando Bailey was, by all accounts, extremely impressive in the pre-season game against Nottingham, and he will come with, in the nicest possible way, a chip on his shoulder, because he was leapfrogged at Bath, wasn't he, by the likes of Kieran Donahue, who became the sort of, who played, I was just checking yesterday, started the Premiership Cup final and was on the bench for the second two finals that Bath got to. So a real sort of bolt from the blue there for Donahue, that sent Bailey down from the sort of second choice 10 to, is he going to moonlight at 12? I actually thought some of his best rugby was at 15. He's a really resourceful young guy, and we're talking about Steve Diamond bigging up Finn Smith. There's a funny story about Orlando Bailey. Diamond sort of slagged off the Eddie Jones selection of Orlando Bailey as an apprentice way back when, if you remember. So I think it's a great move for him. Really is a good move for him, and he will have James O'Connor when James O'Connor's sort of involvement in the Rugby Championship is finished. He will have James O'Connor there as a sounding board, and it's a great opportunity for him. I imagine they will be in the market because of that, because of how open that is. They will be in the market for potentially a big hitter and a marquee player, unless they're from the Premiership. For 26-7, but that's a situation that could go one or two ways. Either somebody can grab hold of it, or it can be tricky. As we I love a very poor NFL reference, but two quarterbacks
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
more is not two quarterbacks or more is no quarterback, right? And it can be similar with fly half if there isn't that certainty.
Charlie, don't worry. There must be about 100 quarterback analogies that we can use over the course of this podcast.
Yeah.
So there will be many, many more. Yeah, Bailey fascinates me. There was a time at Bath pre Russell and I think pre Bailey kind of properly starting for the first team where you would go to Farley house where they train and they were just so excited about him. Like he was genuinely spoken about as like the second coming. Like he was just going to be this generational player. And it's weird how it hasn't quite worked out. Maybe less to benefit as a result of that. Let's
Well, it kind
jump
of
to sorry, Charlie, go on.
no. That just shows you just how cyclical this is because now it's now it's James Lineker at Bath who's being spoken about like that. I forgot Charlie Titcomb's another fly half at Leicester who's sort of in that mix, and he's be looking, I guess, for some game time there. So it is wide open there. But these young tens, there's a lot of scrutiny on them when they come through even into senior training to sort of look assertive and be assertive from the very off. It's a tough gig, which is why the very best of them get paid very handsomely.
Yeah, they do. Given we've been chatting about Bailey's former club, Bath, makes sense to jump there next. Defending champions, which must sound very nice if you're a Bath supporter and you've waited a very, very, very long time to be champions of England again. I think one thing that Johan van Graan mentioned yesterday, and he was on very good form, and also he loved one of my questions. If we just hear what he had to say about that now.
That's such a good question.
Thanks, Johan. That's really kind. Thank you very much.
To lift up the curtain a second, whenever that does happen in a media huddle, there's a sarcastic round of applause, which is absolutely deserved.
To be honest, I think I even audibly reacted. I just don't think you can hear it in that. I think I did something like, thanks. Johan van Graan was talking about Henry Arundel. So when I was chatting to sources for something on the Off-Field Review a couple of weeks ago about who's really impressed in pre-season, spoke to about three different sources at Bath, and they all, interestingly, sometimes people pick out young players. They all came back and said the new signings have all been mega, as in have all slotted in really well. So you're talking about Dan Frost at hooker, who I think will be really handy. Chris Harris from Gloucester, who I think sort of been forgotten about, who was a 2021 Test Lion. I think people sort of forget this, how impressive he is as a defender. Van Graan yesterday picked out Bernard van der Linde, this new scrum half, who I think's joined from the Cheetahs. Spoke about him really highly. He'll be kind of one of the backups to Ben Spencer, and I think he should impress. But Henry Arundel, I mean, Van Graan, Charlie, as you know, isn't prone to sort of going overboard necessarily with praise. He's quite measured about it, unless it's off the back of big wins and big successes. He sounds really impressed with Henry Arundel's speed. I don't think he'd quite appreciated how quick Arundel is, and his verdict was that he's just absolutely rapid. And so I think there was evidence of that in Bath's pre-season game against Glasgow Warriors as well. I think once he sort of gets up to speed, benefits from being in this training environment at Bath, which is a little more settled than at Racing, should we say. I think he could really remind people why he's so good, and I think we'll see the Arundel that we kind of all were so impressed by when he made his big debut at London Irish.
That's such an exciting prospect. The one thing that I guess that threatens that stability at Bath is whether England get Lee Blackett or not, because Lee Blackett is just
yeah,
his impact, his manner, his technical knowledge, his dedication is really quite something. And you've seen the impact on players like Tom de Glanville, like Will Butt, those players that really stepped up in big games for Bath last season. Was really significant, really palpable. Arundel, it is, I'd heard from sort of separate sources, I guess, that out and out speed was what they were keen to tap into with Arundel. Arendel's grew up locally, went to Beach and Cliff. He's so it made a lot of things make sense. He's Bath will be his shop window to get back into the England squad. We know that England are fond of him. He was involved in a training camp, wasn't he, on his sort of return from Racing last season. Van der Linde, interestingly enough, again, is another name that I'd heard that from someone that isn't someone connected to Bath that isn't Van Graan. But I was looking yesterday. He's 24 years old. I think he's made something like 8 or 9 appearances for the Bulls in the URC and the Champions Cup over the past 3 seasons. So he's had a really light loan, and it's just looks like a really smart pickup. And if they are singing his praises in a position where they have not only Ben Spencer, who's been exceptional as a leader and as a kind of game driver, but Tom Carr-Smith came through really well last season and was on the bench might have started. I don't know whether he did start the Premiership Cup final, but certainly on the bench for the 2 other finals. So they rate him. But yeah, it's a virtuous circle at Bath, and I think what will be really interesting is that I think when Van Graan does rotate, those teams will now look really strong and exciting, and that's as a bigger compliment as you could pay.
Yeah, I should add on that Van Graan's response to any questions about Blackett yesterday was no comment, no comment, no comment. I think there were 3. There may have been 4. Like a batsman at the end of day 5, just like blocking out, praying for the end of the innings, just doing a really admirable job, actually. That's a good chunk of the Premiership clubs. Let's have a quick pause, and then we will do the rest of them. Right, Charlie, we're back. 5 clubs left to go. I think we should start, as I look at my little list, with Northampton. So Northampton, interesting for a couple of reasons, because Phil Dowson was quite strong yesterday on how their players are essentially going to be managed over the course of the season, because they had several Lions players, didn't they? Tommy Freeman, Henry Pollock, Alex Mitchell, Finn Smith. Is that it? Yeah, that's it, isn't it? I don't think there's any more.
The players that they sent on the Lions, yeah.
Yeah. So he was basically saying that, look, hopefully during November, me and Steve Borthwick can have a conversation about how we're going to rest players, how players are going to be rested, like what their schedule's going to be. We want Henry Freeman now to be as good as he can be in like 5. You want him to be this good in like 5 years' time, 10 years' time. You want him to be the veteran player and for his body to last. And I think that is important. We had a chat with Freeman, and so obviously players spend their post-Lions tour breaks a bit differently. So Tommy Freeman said he went to Mallorca for a bit, expected. He said he also went to Florida and spent a lot of time going on the roller coasters at all the theme parks in Florida for a couple of weeks, which I was like, okay, that's one way to kind of switch off from a stressful test series. I think he said the Hagrid ride at Harry Potter World, I'm guessing, was his highlight, was his favourite one. So he said that. By contrast, Tom Curry said that he went crabbing in Norfolk. So, there's ways to detox from a Lions tour. Yeah, it's a broad church. So my point being about Northampton, they've got all these young players. I think Henry Pollock's been having a great time based on his Instagram. He's been sort of playing golf up in Scotland. He was also in Mallorca, I think. It seems as though, and he was only back in training this week, as a lot of the Lions players were. That's going to be really key for them, isn't it? Managing those young players. And I wonder, when England play, say, Fiji in November, which is the second game, isn't it, on the Saturday, do you think that we could see some players maybe rested from that game, the likes of Freeman? Or do you think Steve Borthwick will think, nah, I want my strongest team together for 4 weeks? What do you reckon?
Well, I think they lost. They lost the last time Fiji were at Twickenham, so that's the result is clearly the result is clearly very important. And Fiji have turned over Scotland this summer and will come with a lot of firepower. I think what the Argentina tour has given them is a confidence that layer beneath them can not only have sort of the talent and the kind of physical assets to step up to Test rugby, but they can also play in a kind of cohesive way. So if you're thinking about Freeman specifically, there's going to be Tom Roebuck, there's going to be Will Muir, there's going to be Manuel Feoboso, Caden Murley. There are other options there, so it can be done. I think as much as possible now for these next 2 years, Steve Borthwick will want to narrow down on what his best World Cup squad is. So that's 33, and that will be a couple of lineups within that. But it is a totally fair point and I think that the frustration for clubs, and I think you really see it in the fans, is that are those training camp weeks before the autumn and before the Six Nations, when there still is that direct clash with Premiership fixtures. And I know Saints were really badly hit by that. I think it was ahead of the Six Nations. They played the Quins at the Stoop, and just there was that spate of injuries, wasn't there? And all of a sudden, Saints were going to go into that game at Quins with Pollock and with Curtis Langdon and guys who aren't quite there but are still super influential at Premiership level, and all of a sudden they didn't have them either. And that was a new thing for Saints last season. What they've done, they've been really clever. I think again they always are really in the market with picking up, Callum Chick, who probably isn't going to be involved in the England squad initially. Certainly, he might use Saints as a springboard back to that, but JJ Van der Mesch, big bopping South African back rower, is going to be available all year. And Anthony Bellew, the France fly half, because what the thing with Saints is that it's likely that their 1A, 1B fly halves in Finn Smith and George Furbank are both going to be away with England at any given time if they're both fit. So Bellew is there as that safety blanket, with a point to prove himself, having come out of French rugby. So yes, I like. There's a lot of time. I've got a lot of time for Phil Dowson. Just makes very sensible points and isn't afraid to make them quite strongly. It sounds like he did that yesterday.
He certainly did, and also rocking a slightly longer haircut than I remember from last season. A little bit wavy at the back. Just had a good summer. These little details, they're very important, and they're the kind of things that we really try and monitor. Next, I want to do Quins. So Danny Wilson wasn't there at the Prem launch because he was unwell. So the defence coach Jason Gilmore stepped in, and he was basically asked what the core objective has been this pre-season, and he said we need to stop the fade outs at the end of the season, where basically Quins have kind of done quite well up until that kind of Six Nations start of spring block, and then 2 years in a row they've really faded. I'm fascinated by them this season for a couple of reasons, mainly because I can't imagine them without Danny Kerr there. I think it seems very strange, and it puts a big onus on their leaders, so Alex Dombrandt and Caden Murley, to kind of be, to really take on that mantle and to step forward, which, Dombrandt's had a lot of experience in that role. Apparently Kerr was at Quins this week, but any suggestions of a comeback were quickly dismissed by Gilmore, who suggested that if he did make a comeback, he would have been running around like Gilmore's granddad. So don't think.
Wow.
I know, which was shots fired. So I don't think we'll see that. One player who they did mention, who a couple of sources mentioned to me as well, who's been really impressing there, is Zach Carr, this kind of young 21-year-old back rower. He feels like someone who's been doing a lot more line-out work, and so I think you might see more of him in their kind of matchday squads as well, a potential back rower to come in there in a what's already a very talented kind of group. So he'd be someone to keep an eye on. But yeah, how do you feel about Quins?
I feel again I guess the problem for them is that or has been historically, what they want to be. They really want to be a club that is founded on homegrown players and the connections and relationships that those guys forge, and that's brought them success in the past for sure. I think what they've moved to do this summer is to sign to sort of bolster that, if that makes sense. So George Turner is a smart recruiter, hooker. Guido Petty can give them a bit of versatility about how that they go with their pack, because he can be at lock or he can go to six, and they're really kind of, if they want to go really heavy, Jack Kenningham and Will Evans just caused havoc at the breakdown last season, but they can sort of move that arrangement around with who they've with how they've recruited. They've lost Jabulu, who we'll get to. They've lost Anyanwu, who went to Montpellier. But I think they have kind of reacted well to that, and I think they've got a steady enough squad. They are one of the sides that I could see right down the bottom, and I could see them running hot and getting into the fifth, sixth, and looking up towards the playoffs too. It depends. I think, on the what relationships they settle on as far as selection. What sort of combinations in key positions, and how they hit the ground running. Yeah, a tricky one to gauge, but I think who they've brought, where they've recruited, has been quite smart.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if we maybe, because you mentioned Jabulu, I think he could end up being a really, really good bit of recruitment by Sale. Sale are interesting, aren't they? Because they sort of have a couple of positions where they have key kind of like young players. So Jabulu at hooker, and then you've got Luke Cowan-Dickey on hand, sort of be a mentor there. And then there's a lot of excitement around Ollie Davies, kind of the young fly half. You've got George Ford there to kind of basically act as like a second coach for him to learn off, which is an ideal kind of setup in terms of having mentors like on hand to guide players and to teach them a few tricks as well that they can then bring into their game. I feel like Sale are quite well set up, but they are sort of they're on the cusp of it, aren't they? They need to sort of break through, and they've come up short, agonisingly short in recent seasons. This feels like a big year for them, and their setup.
It's reassuringly tame summer, I would say, as far because there's small turnover. They even losing one of the Duprees, who've been sort of just Jean-Luc Dupree has been one of the sort of eminent players in the Premiership over the last 2-3 seasons, just a total wrecking ball. But sort of quietly picked up Jack Vermeulen from Exeter. That's just really, really smart. They're one area I think of concern might be too strong, but they're one area that they'll have to monitor and get right is lock. They've got young Tom Burrow, who's been the England under-20 captain, who has a fantastic demeanour, speaks really, really well. But he's sort of coming into the senior sort of setup and will need to put on size. And while he's playing isn't easy, and people need to be sort of they'll be patient with him, I'm sure. And yeah, I think that's the pinch point for me is what their pack looks like game to game. What their back row will be fine. It will be how they kind of manage those lock positions, I think, and what that does for them as far as set piece return.
Yeah, I think you're right. Charlie, we've got 2 clubs left: Exeter or Saracens. Where do you want to go? Which one do you want to do first?
Let's go to Exeter, because down on the notes you've written down 2 more of Burrow's England 20 colleagues in Ben Cohen and Kane James, and Kane James is a lot of fun. I was at the England 20 Wales under 20 Six Nations game where Wales did a job on England, absolutely just overwhelmed them. They just were sort of spurred by what was quite an emotional, raucous occasion. But Kane James, who has Welsh heritage, was England's best player probably. I think he made something like 25, 26 carries, which is remarkable. Speaking of putting on size, he's potentially will have to do that, and it will be a sort of journey. Like, he's the same age as Henry Pollock. It will be the same sort of journey for that. You can't expect him to explode in the same way Pollock has, but from the small sort of amount we've seen from him at first team level, he is made of the right stuff, So that'll be very interesting. We spoke a bit about signings in the case of Tom Jordan. Signings aging well between being introduced and arriving at the club, and the 2 Aussies that Rob Baxter has picked up, Lenny Katow and Tom Hooper. Wow, they were signed as sort of Len Nicotel, sort of an international regular, Tom Hooper, a fringe international. And now they look exceptional. You know, Len Nicotel's probably been the player of the Rugby Championship so far, and Tom Hooper very close to that. You know, he was part of a pack that really stood up to the Lions in that third test, made a massive jackal turnover on his own line. Yeah, those interesting times there too. 10, I guess, like, so when we could talk about Ben Cohen here, when he will have opportunities to nail down that 10 shirt. I think Harvey Skinner and Will Hayden would have both out of contract, so maybe a bit of a changing of the guard there. And they've renewed at 9 as well, with Stephen Varney and Charlie Chapman coming in as well. So yeah, as ever, we tend to talk about, you know, big strong pack at Exeter, a lot of excitement out wide, in midfield and out wide. And then you're wondering, you know, do they have the control from halfback? So that'll be the crux.
Yeah, I think Rob Baxter was quite funny on Tom Burrow yesterday, in that Tom Hooper, in that they signed Hooper before he kind of broke through, like you suggested, and now it looks like great business. But at the same time, they weren't banking on him being this kind of Wallaby front runner, like key player. So you do suddenly have questions about, oh, when will he turn up from the Rugby Championship? What happens in November as well with the Wallabies? But I mean, I feel like that's quite a nice problem to have, in terms of, you know, a player who you've scouted and who you've ID'd as someone who could be a massive factor for you has delivered on that already. You're dead right about Iquitel, which is why it's a bit weird that he's scratched from the team this weekend against Argentina, which is a bit of a surprise, unless there's a knock there that we're not sure about. But I mean, he has also been phenomenal, and once Exeter get them both in the door, they're going to be much stronger. Cohen really interests me at fly half. I think he sort of had a run of matches back in March of last season where he kind of impressed, and it just developed, and it was almost like a mini kind of trial to see how he would get on. I think if they can get Cohen and James in their matchday 23 early from the season and properly blood them and get them up and running, those are two huge figures for Exeter kind of moving forward over the next 8 to 10 years if they keep them there at the club. I think they're both really, really talented prospects, and yeah, like you say, James is a lot of fun. Which takes us to Saracens, last but not least. Sorry, Saracens followers, you've had to listen to us rattle on about all the other clubs. Saracens in an interesting spot. I think the key narrative for them all off-season, chatting to sources there and chatting to people about Saracens, it's not so much Owen Farrell coming back in terms of Owen Farrell like himself. Like, I think Farrell will be very good. He's going to be available from the first week of the season, unlike a lot of the other Lions players who aren't allowed to come back until round 3, because Farrell only played a certain number of minutes, and because he didn't play that much last season at Racing because of injuries. He's available for Saracens from week 1, so he'll be in their opening side, you would expect. And look, he brings so much experience. He will be hungry to kind of put what was a bit of a failure at Racing behind him. I've got no doubt about that. But it's how the other players learn off him. And Mark McCall yesterday stressed how Farrell has already been, obviously, and shockingly, unsurprisingly, playing a huge role in helping Louis Johnson, the young 10, and Fergus Burke, the Scotland 10, kind of after training with the little bits and bobs, sort of bringing them up to speed. And when I was doing a piece on the Off-Field Review about who's been really shining in pre-season, lots of players at Saracens were named, lots of young forwards, but the key name was Fergus Burke. And it was the sense that Burke has come back from the Scotland tour over the summer, and he looks a different player. He looks confident. He's playing more aggressively at the line. He's throwing out passes. There's just a real shift in his mentality. And the line from a source was, he looks like the player we thought we had signed. And another source said, just because Owen Farrell's come back doesn't mean necessarily that one of Farrell or Burke has to start at 10. You could have Burke at 10 and Farrell at 12. Basically, Charlie, I'm fascinated by it. I'm really interested how it's going to play out in terms of Farrell coming back, how they hopefully get more out of Burke, because Farrell's 33, Burke's 25, Burke's potentially their long-term 10. I've been talking a lot about fly halves. What do you reckon? How do you think it's going to play out?
God, who knows? I think with a lot of eyes on it, with a lot of scrutiny on Farrell's form as well as his influence off the pitch. I think that's going to have to be very, very good, because Racing was just such a stuttering year. There were flashes of his quality for the Lions, but but mainly from 12. The whole back line, I think Saracens. They've signed a guy called Nairu from Coventry, a tight head who's got a lot of admirers, and that could turn out to be Fijian guy, and that could be a huge, give them a huge uplift in the future. But I think there will be scrutiny on their front row for sure. But I think their back five is strong as ever, looks really, really strong, and their back line is. It feels like it's all up for grabs almost. Given what you were saying just there, they've got Max Malins coming back from Bristol, who's been playing 15, might actually have to go to wing because Edit Daly looks so good at 15 for the Lions. One way of getting Burke and Farrell in the team would be as 10, 15, but so there's 3 potential 15s there. They will want pace and ballast in the side, which you can get from young guys like Tobias Elliott, Roti Segun. They've got a very young player called Nur Kalouri. I think I've butchered his surname there, but has looked electric for England age grade sides. And then the centres, Lazowski's out, which is what has allowed Farrell to come in on injury cover. But you've got Sam Spink, who didn't hit the ground running last year. He's there ready to impress. Ollie Hartley, Lucio Cinti. There's Nick Tompkins. There's a lot of choice, and it will be about whittling down, and maybe just starting to transition that back line into a sort of younger, more dynamic entity, really. But yeah, that's all with the backdrop of Owen Farrell kind of returning and being this huge presence again.
Yeah, fascinating season for Saracens. We did it. That's all the 10 clubs. We've done it. A little bit of info on each one. We'll do a proper preview a couple of weeks' time. I'm sure we'll chat about them next week as well and how things are tracking after the Premiership Rugby Cup games. But yeah, that's the Prem. We're going to take a little pause, and then we're going to dive into a few tactical bits from New Zealand against South Africa 2, which is on Saturday morning in Wellington. Rugby Championship rolls on. We've got New Zealand against South Africa 2 this weekend. New Zealand South Africa 1 was pretty good. You did some analysis for the Telegraph on it. What really stood out for you from game 1, and what are you sort of looking to see from game 2? I was one detail before you start. Razzie naming his team on, when was it, Monday or Sunday? Thoroughly enjoyable, something fresh, and also quite a funky backline. So sorry, now I've said that. Game 1, what did you learn? What did you like?
Clearly kind of shaped by the conditions, but how and that made the kicking battle absolutely pivotal. And given how New Zealand had gone in Argentina, just coughing up a lot of possession, losing a lot of impetus in the kicking battle because Argentina were just seemingly far more organised and urgent around that second ball, around those sort of crumbs, as the coaches kind of call it, on those ricochets and stuff like that. I thought that New Zealand would be under the pump there again, because that was the sort of template that South Africa had gone to in that second game against Australia. But New Zealand pivoted. Well, New Zealand improved, I thought, in the kicking exchanges. They are never going to be tidy, but the kicking exchanges actually laid on. With Proctor sort of picking up a turnover, booting downfield, big chase, line out platform, essentially, and then later with Bowden Barrett's fantastic hooked 50-22, those 2 kicks laid on their 2 tries by earning decent line out platform. And when you can connect your game like that, as they did, the first try, so I've sort of detailed a bit of this. The first try, bit of midfield, front line out, feign a maul into midfield, and then there's a little bit of midfield shape, all of which drags the South African defence a bit narrow and isolates Vili Leroux coming around as that fullback in that pendulum. Now, Narawa was, I guess, lucky to the kick pass itself was a bit more floated, I think, than Bona Barrett would have liked, because he would have liked to have got it to Narawa directly, so he gets that one-on-one with LaRue, but there's a slip, and that's where it's lucky. But I still feel as though the kind of foundations have been laid with that midfield shape, and just getting that one-on-one between Narawa and LaRue. And then the second one, we see a lot of over the top lineouts these days. Normally it can be the centre kind of picking up, or it can be a back rower sort of fading around the outside of a lifting pod. And it was just done very cleverly to get Wallace Satiti into the seam, and then Will Jordan arriving brilliantly, as his sense of timing and his acceleration really is quite special, and his try scoring record stands testament to that. There was another in between those two tries, so that's all about really detailed planning and kind of collective execution in tricky conditions. And when you go 7-14 and when the rain's teeming down on a really greasy surface, and you're at home, and there's that almost that desperation factor of you preserving that Eden Park record, I think that's where that's such a big cushion to have. Now there was another sort of really big clue as to how well the All Blacks had prepared with them stopping that midfield line-out lift, and that's looked, when they started trialing that, the Springboks, in the games against the game against Italy, and then again sort of a bit more in a bit of a futile way when they were chasing the game in the Ellis Park against Australia. It's looked progressively more gimmicky, hasn't it? And New Zealand were just ready for it. The two fringe defenders, who were Fletcher Newell and Cody Taylor, I think, tread water, held back so they didn't start them all, and Barrett and Tupavai, who loves playing against the Springboks, smashed into the sort of maul that was developing. Now, that said to me that they almost did enough in that first quarter, and I know South Africa had a lot of pressure, but since then they did enough in that first quarter to sort of lay the foundations for the win. What we'll see next week is that they're going to have to be very smart to have more variation on that set piece shape to catch out South Africa again. However, I'm unsure that South Africa get the scrummaging dominance that they did this time, because they might do later on in the game, but bringing in Cyril Lomax to start looks smart. I got it the wrong way around. I thought that South Africa would be able to hurt New Zealand with a kicking game, and South Africa would be sort of held firm at the scrum. So I think there's more to come from New Zealand scrum. I think, as far as a tactical sort of battle, I think where South Africa pivot to now, with Sasha Feinberg and Mngomezulu starting at 10 in his first start since the Georgia game earlier in the summer, I think, what does he give them? I think he gives them his basics are coming on all the time. He's young, but really, really kind of fizzing distribution and a good kicking game. But he can really come alive in those transition moments. And I think that's South Africa being sharp in transition, sharp enough to kind of feed their speed and hurt New Zealand, will be the key to that. Because if they don't do that, I can see that fading away from them. And the bigger picture is that if they lose again, South Africa, they're playing an Argentina side twice who'll have nothing to lose, staring down the barrel of a Rugby Championship campaign where they might have lost 4 games, and that's wild, really. So a lot to sort of look out for. It was fascinating more for, I think, where those two teams are sitting as far as transition and everything else. So this second one is just another window into that.
Yeah, it feels like they're both kind of going through like one of those pre World Cup years where they're just trying a lot of stuff and just, I mean, the All Blacks have been handing out debuts rapidly. This backline with Moody at 13 and Damien Willemser at 12 is lively. For some reason, this backline makes me look at Cobus Reinach's name and feel that he must be like 103 years old. Just like Cheslin Colby's not young, but for some reason Reinach just surrounded in that backline just makes him seem absolutely ancient. And it really tickled me when I saw the team selection. If and also, and I say that about the experimentation because say the Box lose this, and say they've only won 1 in 4 in the Rugby Championship. You can already tell how that's going to play back in South Africa. Like, they will be furious. It's all part of the plan. It's all part of the plan to just try stuff out and to fix stuff out. Now, are we going to see those infield mauls again? Hopefully never, because like you say, it's become a bit gimmicky, and I'm just not sure. Don't think it's doing anything. Don't think anyone's really shocked or impressed by it anymore. It was fun against whoever they ran it against in the summer test, but I mean, I don't think we need to see it again. But I just think that the whole kind of experimentation and just trying things out, it's all part of the process. Because next year's the year. Next year's the year that matters. You just have to. This is the year post the mid cycle mark of this kind of period to start trying stuff and just to see what's going to stick for 2027. So I'm all kind of for it, really. I don't mind a bit of experimentation, and I look forward to seeing how it plays out. And Australia against Argentina in Sydney is sold out. So in the other game, which I think is also awesome, a reflection of how well things are going for the Wallabies. And you've got Tane Edmed at 10. The Wallabies, bless them, talks about Leicester like trying to work out who's going to play fly half. They're not much different, are they? Because that's this one position that they just cannot seem to kind of nail down at the moment.
They're I think it's funny, isn't it? There's almost like their success, that last minute win. We don't know quite the full sort of situation with their injuries, but how I wonder whether that last minute win in another fantastic game, they have got some grit about them, this Australia side, but getting over the line against Australia in the first game has maybe given them the opportunity to rest more in looking forward to the Bledisloe games, where which really will be a gauge of how much progress they're making. That's what kind of, I guess, the difference between the big difference between the Rugby Championship and the Six Nations, as far as the load on the players, is that travel, and I think that's probably makes coaches more inclined to rest players. That's probably important. So yeah, there's a bit of that going on, but I think the Australia has certainly earned the sort of right to have a look at Tane Edmed, who was pretty good off the bench in the Cape Town game, actually, and helped, had kind of decimated Wallabies backline, come pretty close to causing going back to back against South Africa in South Africa, which would have been remarkable.
Charlie, it's cap. Well, just the final point on this, it's cap 149 for James Slipper. Two things: he's going for the record. He's seeing Alan Wynne-Jones' record of 170 test caps with 158 for Wales, 12 for the Lions, and he's thinking, I want a piece of that. But also, the way that he seems to keep sort of just shuffling along and winning these caps. 200? How long would it take? Is it possible?
170 blows my mind. I think I'm not having it. I'm not. Oh. The thing, he's got the carrot of the World Cup, hasn't he? Home World Cup. So can he get there in that time? No.
Yeah, Can he? I'd have to map it all out, and we'll give you the answer next week. I reckon he's going for it.
No, there's not. There's not.
Alan Wynne-Jones needs to watch out. I think he'll keep going. I think he wants to get 171. Anyway, we'll find out. We will see.
Sorry, I thought you meant 200. Yeah, 171. Yes. 200. Yeah. I'm not having. Mad.
200, he might need to become like a kind of player coach kind of role into his 40s and just like drop in for the odd test each year, which I'm not against. If he's up for it, I think I'd say go for it. Okay, that's the Rugby Championship. A tiny pause, and then we will chat about the Women's World Cup quarterfinals. Charlie, we probably, I think we know who's going to win these 4 games. If I check the fixtures, I think we're fairly certain that New Zealand will beat South Africa, Canada will beat Australia, France will beat Ireland, and England will beat Scotland. And I'm not saying that to be drab, but that's just kind of when we were doing the tournament maps before the start of the World Cup about how England would potentially get back to this World Cup final and win it after their heartache in New Zealand 3 years ago in 2022, and also who they would potentially face. And we realised, okay, so it's going to be the winner of that Canada-New Zealand semi-final everything is sort of just falling slightly into place. You got a glimpse of England in Brighton. Firstly, what did you make of like the vibe in Brighton? And secondly, just how impressed were you with the way England kind of dismantled Australia?
Fantastic vibe in Brighton. Really, really special to be there. Actually, see 30,000 both days. I was less impressed by England than I was by New Zealand, I have to say. Both two 40-point wins, but I thought, and actually New Zealand's only, as this was a point that Ireland coach Scott Beeman made, was that New Zealand went bang bang at the end to go from 26 to 40. But I just thought that they looked like a side with another gear. They looked like a really balanced, explosive side. It's the first time actually that I've been less confident about England's prospects of winning it all, because Australia, I know it sounds stupid when it's 47-7, wasn't it, the England Australia score, but it sounds a bit dumb, but and England could have pulled away sort of on the verge of that fourth quarter. But it just, and Alex Matthews said it herself as captain, it just felt a bit sticky for them. Just not really that backline fluidity yet. And there's time to get that right. They should beat Scotland. And then their semi-final is likely, unless it's Ireland, likely to be France, who they just cannot stop pumping, cannot stop beating very really easily. So they've got time to sort of find a bit of a groove with that. But New Zealand were just a really impressive watch, I would say. They have some really, really special athletes. They defended brilliantly. It would have been really easy for them to sort of let up tries after big Ireland line breaks, and they just didn't. And they were. It was a performance that you've kind of become used to sort of watching from their men's side, because it was a bit of a rope-a-dope about it. Really stout defence, and then attack that can just pick you off in transition, and unleash really impressive athletes. So it's a tournament that's coming to a head just really nicely, I think.
I mean, England is so lucky that Canada and New Zealand have to face each other in the semi-finals, because Canada have looked great. New Zealand, I think it's crazy how just as Portia Woodman bows out, you get Braxton Sorensen McGee sort of emerging as like this teenage potential superstar who's going to boss the women's game. Although Georgia Miller, the black back row for the All Blacks, has just been awesome. Like, she scored that crazy try against Australia in the warm up matches, and I think for like defenders beaten in this tournament, she's just blown everyone away. So I think it's all kind of falling into place. And you're right. I think it's England going to the Scotland game. Scotland, of course, you've got Fran McGee, who's scored tries for fun in basically every game. So I think she's up to 6, and she's tied as top try scorer. There won't be any Ellie Kildun. That's a blow for England. They'll miss her. But I think you're right in terms of the depth and how they'll go into it. Yeah, I think all signs are still pointing towards England in that final, but the pressure and the sense of expectation on this team is just unbelievable. I don't think we've seen anything like it since the All Blacks in 2011 hosting that Men's World Cup. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out. Right, one more quick pause, and then it's our final section before bowing out. Okay, so we wanted to introduce a little fun game to end these episodes with, because we're such noses, Charlie, and such rugby bores, we've occasionally played this game with each other, where we've just sent a screenshot of a player's kind of Wikipedia career, and we've challenged the other person to kind of name that player. So we're going to I'll read out their career. If you're on YouTube and commenting, if you're listening to the podcast and you're leaving a comment, which you should absolutely do, don't spoil it for anybody else. Just do it yourself at home. Store it in the back of your mind, and then next week's podcast episode on next Friday will reveal who it is. So, Charlie, I'm going to start. So this player from 2012 to 2019 played for the Hurricanes and made 115 appearances. Charlie, what's next on their list?
Hunt from 2019 to 2022. He was at Wasps.
After Wasps, they went to Ulster from 2022 to 2023.
And then now, from 2024 to now, they are at the Reds. Do you want to hear about? Do the listeners want to hear about their international career?
I think we should do, mainly because it's quite an interesting international career because they played for two different test teams. So the first one is New Zealand, made a single appearance back in 2013, and the other team, Charlie,
from 2022 onwards. So still in the mix. Samoa. And a clue that won't help you at all, or might, if you know it, you'll know it. But it's very niche, and I can maybe explain more when I come back on, or next time I'm on. This player produced one of the best assist celebrations I've ever seen. So set up a try, and it was the smoothest, one of the coolest things you'll see.
when you said the clue would be useless, I didn't think you meant like completely and utterly. Okay, that's going to do nothing. Okay, right. As we said, no conferring. The answer will be revealed next week. Charlie, that's a wrap. That's the debut episode of the Rugby Bunker done. Listeners, we hope you enjoyed this as much as we've loved doing it. Just a couple of requests. If you have enjoyed it and you want us to keep this going in the long term, we are on the lookout for any sponsors. So please get in touch. Please drop me an email, bencolesport@gmail.com. Let me know if you're interested. And also the obligatory request to please like and subscribe on YouTube so we can beat the algorithm. And if you're watching, and if you're listening on whatever podcast provider, please give us a nice review. Please share it with everybody you know. Let's get this up and running. Charlie, it's been a joy. Thank you for joining me.
No worries at all, Ben.
And we'll see you next week. Cheers, listeners. Bye.